Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the X Force Global channel. Thank you very much for joining. Hope each and every one of you is having a fantastic start of the week. Mondays are definitely the worst, but hang in there as Bitcoin is also trying to hang in there as well. Now, as Bitcoin's price action is starting to get trickier, we have to really take the time to organize this as best as possible. So I'll do my best to explain the possible outcomes and the probabilities attached to these ideas accordingly to the rules and guidelines and what kind of transitional phase we are in, whether we are in a bullish continuation or a larger combo type correction. We'll go over the scenarios now. So starting off with the macro overview or the medium time frame analysis, we must get this flat idea out of the way, even though it's starting to lose its validity. It's not invalid. Miraculously, it's not invalid. It just needs to move out of this zone very, very quickly as we're now pretty much at peak validation. Otherwise, we're going to be working in some larger corrective combo of some sort, like I have mentioned. So if we're going to be working with this 1-2 idea, just like we've been talking about with the previous narrative of the last analysis that I've uploaded, we can say that this larger wave 3 and 4 has ended. This is the end of the correction, and now we're working for 5 waves up for the final 5th wave of after this wave 4. Now, ideally, as a bull, we all want this scenario to happen. This is the best way to do it, and the only way we can do it now is pretty much as this possible flat idea. So how are we going to fit this flat idea and get this 1-2 out of the way before we rocket out of here? Well, we are really at that peak validation level, like I've said. First of all, let's recap what we have originally assumed. First of all, this move out of here was definitely impulsive. It was a 5-wave move out, and we broke out of this final diagonal possibility as well, and we had that trend line here, and it was retested as well before we got out of here. But we started to lose a lot of steam, and now we're in this zone over here. But first of all, how are we going to create this expanded flat? Well, like I said, we retraced down for that possible wave A, very shallow of that 3A2, and we originally wanted to see this as the expanded flat idea. We wanted to see a very short in time for a wave 2, but this is starting to get really extended in time, both in size and both in time, right? So the only way I am seeing this, it's still valid, and I do have a case study on this. If we go back to that case study, which was Coupang, we did see a very similar type of hybrid idea or a similar scenario in that matter, where we saw a 5-wave move into wave A, possibility B or 2, and then possibly C or 3. But the overall expectation was that we wanted to see this large move, and that is kind of what we want to expect for Bitcoin as well. We saw a very similar B pocket zone going into that 1618, surpassing it. Bitcoin also surpassed that as well. And we also seeing this kind of type of variation in terms of the diagonal and the expanded form. But again, even though we're seeing a lot of the similarities, it still loses its validity just based on probabilities, ladies and gentlemen. And that's the whole idea here. But as long as we continue to stay above these regions, and if we do start to get impulsively moving out of here, this idea still remains valid. And I think this 1-2 idea could be coming into fruition if this wave 3 becomes more parabolic in nature, and then we can talk about this not being a 3-wave move even. So if we do come back into how we're going to see this, we can say that this was the A, this was the B, highly expanded into that B pocket zone. But we also originally thought this was the end, right? Where we had this ending as a C wave, but that didn't happen either. So again, we're at peak validation, ladies and gentlemen. We're pretty much where there's no more room for this to play out. So there's 2 ways we can see this ending for this C wave. Well, again, we need to have 5 waves for this actionary wave. Since actionary waves are 5 waves, we need to have this as a 5-wave move into that C wave, right? So in order to get that C wave, this becomes the new 4th wave, and now this has to be some kind of expanding variation of the ending diagonal. There's no other way we can see it other than a contracting variation, which I'll just show in a moment. But we have met pretty much, again, the peak validity of this idea, where wave 5 has ended in some kind of really expanded form where this was all overlaps, and now we're looking for some kind of bottom, since we are in that Fibonacci golden zone at the 618 or the 786. And that's the most important thing, that we get supported here before we rocket out of here. But we really need to get out of here now. So again, wave 5 is longer than wave 3, and wave 3 is shorter than wave 1. Wave 1 doesn't really have any attachments to the rules or guidelines. It's just assumed that wave 1 is going to be shorter than wave 3. However, it could be longer. It doesn't really matter. The original expectation of that guideline and the rules all attached do meet. And wave 5, again, does not have to meet the trend line as long as it is longer than wave 3 of the subwave. So we do have all the expectations here met, and we're at peak validation for this idea. But then there is also another way we can look at this. Instead of saying that this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we can say that this is a wave 1 or A, B, C, where we can count 5 waves into this and keeping the original count of that internal count and saying that this was a sharp wave 2, coming down for another 3, 4, 5, and saying that this was the contracting idea, which is also now at its peak validation. So it really doesn't matter, just really how you want to look at this expanding or contracting variation of the diagonal. So how are we going to look at this? Again, since the wave 2, 4 trend line is also contracting in that form where between the 1, 3, 5, we can say that now the wave 5 is shorter than wave 3 here, and that keeps that diagonal of the contracting variation also intact. And even with a small overshoot, we can say that this is still going to be shorter than wave 3, but still starting to get a little bit trickier as we start to move more down. And that is where most of our next scenarios are going to be giving us a little bit higher probabilities in terms of what kind of corrective move we're in, instead of saying that we're in a 1-2 flat. So again, ladies and gentlemen, this is the peak validation of that 1-2 flat. Maybe in the next maybe in the next video analysis, we won't be even seeing this scenario. Who knows? Maybe we'll be seeing a completely different pattern. But again, this is now pretty much at peak validation. I would say this is the last time we're going to be reviewing this. If in the case we do move out of here, we'll continue to use this idea. However, we need to start talking about alternative scenarios now. Now, what is the alternative scenario? We got to go into scenario number 2, which is now again tricky, right? Because we were talking about this being the end of something where we had 3, 4 completing here. But the only alternative way we can start doing is making educated guess and saying that we're in a larger corrective scenario. And the only way we can do that is because we have this idea as our main kind of footprint for the beginning steps of what could be a larger combo corrective of a WXY. So what we have here is a possible combination pattern. We have a possible flat going into wave W, okay? And then we have, alternatively, we're now labeling this as an ABC, going into wave W of some sort, okay? And this now, since X wave could be any corrective pattern, and now we're not able to see a 5-wave move here, we have to alternatively label this as an ABC, and that puts us into a wave W, as wave Ws have to be an ABC. And what's next is how we're going to be seeing this X wave extend either in time, which is the sub-scenario of this, or we see a shorter X wave as a possible flat idea. And then we come down, and then we come back up, and then go back down. So, but for this, ideally what we want to see for this X wave is extend in time and in size as well, so that it matches not only in Fibonacci ratio wise, ladies and gentlemen, for the combination pattern, but also keeping some kind of equality within this zone. We want to be, staying within, again, a respective Fibonacci zone, which I'm not going to go over because it's a little bit too advanced on what the rules and guidelines are for where combinations are in terms of where the Fibonacci levels are going to be most respected. But the most important thing here is that we create some kind of equilibrium overall. So if we're working in this X wave, what we ideally want to see is seeing this internal move here, this ABC or WXY, is this extending in time, and then seeing this move up, going into a 3-wave. This actually should be a 3-wave, sorry. And if we're doing that in a 3-wave fashion, as such, again, this internal count is going to be the most important thing. Now, how are we going to be getting that? So I do have this labeled here for this possible internal 3. Now, as this internal B wave, now we're getting very more advanced into the time frames. Now we have to zoom in. Like I said, we want to see this larger X wave of this transitional wave of this before we go into that Y wave as long as we can, basically. And that'll give us a signal that maybe the lows are still protected, and we're going, even though the next leg is assuming that we're going to go down here, this is where we assume as Elliott wave analysts that it's going to be a bear trap of some sort, right? So if we have this three-way move up, what we're looking for, like I said, is a three-way move into this X wave. Now, how are we going to look for that? If we kind of remove this, we can say that this has a W, X, and then Y. We can say even utilizing the idea of this idea of going into a diagonal, that's going to put us into the actionary wave of wave A. So we're going to have to assume that this is an A wave no matter what, right? So if we're assuming this next move, this has to be in the form of a three wave and then a phi wave going into that A, B, C for that X wave, okay? So we would have to alternatively label this as an A, B, and then C. We don't want this high. We don't even have to put it that high, but again, I would expect we're going to get rejected if this is the assumed bottom around the Fibonacci zone over here. Have this A here or B here, and then phi wave move down into that C, possibly into that golden Fibonacci ratio zone of that 6786 or possibly the 618, depending on how this plays out. But again, could alternatively even say that we're in a triangle of some sort. So if we say that we're in a triangle, all we have to do is say that this is part of an A, B, C, D, E. Wave A would be alternatively labeled here. Wave B will be here, and then C here, or WXY. Doesn't really matter. Then what we can say is that will help us increase the time for this internal X wave, and then we'll finish off that Y wave as a three-wave move. And then we come up, finish that X wave, and we're done. And then we come back down here. Most likely we'll be rejected around the 618.7 just to create that equilibrium. And then we'll come back down, finish that Y wave, and we're done with this wave 4, most likely finished as an idealized zigzag. But again, could be any type of corrective pattern as a flat, triangle, or zigzag. You can't have two zigzags, but again, remember, since we're working with a flat, it's going to be most likely a zigzag pattern as we want to be sharp in nature as well. So that is the second idea. Now there's a sub scenario just in case we do move down on the micro time frames. We could alternatively label this again, that utilizing that 5-wave idea down into that A wave. This corrective zone again was very overlapping, so we can say that this was an A, B, C, D, E triangle for wave B, and say that internal wave B was done. And then if we're going to say this is the final impulse of this partner leg, we can say that we're working in a possible flat idea for this X wave as well, just as likely, right? So if this is 5, 3, or a corrective pattern B, and then we work for a 5-wave move down for that C into that B, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, it should be another fake out for the bears if we're expecting this to be a larger X wave pattern. So if this happens, bada bing, we're going to have another 5-wave move into that C. We'll say that this is a larger flat corrective move and label this as alternative ABC into that wave X, and then we come down for that Y wave just as likely as the other one. So this is how we're going to be looking at this scenario. If it's just very easy to kind of summarize. Again, if we're looking for the internal B wave extending in time, we're going to be looking for this idea as a WXY for this internal X wave. If not, and we come down really quickly right now and we don't get supported whatsoever at these micro time frames, which is very possible, we still have a possibility of a larger ABC, a flat for this X wave, and we won't even retest any further than that 0.7 Fibonacci zone. So those are the two main ideas that I would say is the most likely scenario, but there is another scenario where we don't even retest the bottom, and that is in the idea of a possible final triangle. Now, I'm not really keen to this scenario because triangles are very rare to have in a Y wave, and in order to do so, we really need to figure out if we're still going to be continuing 3 waves, right? And that's the only way we can create a triangle, which is in the variations of only 3 waves. And you can only have one complex correction within a triangle. So whatever triangle subwave you're using, you can only utilize or use up one get out of free jail card for a possible wave being a complex correction. Not only that, you're assuming all of them are going to be 3 waves, right? But it still does give us a little bit of idea that maybe we're still within a protected bottom zone, and saying that this was some kind of running flat possibility or even an ABC. And now we're working in this X wave being complete, and now we have this ABC going into that same idea of this actionary wave being completed, going into this as a 3 wave, and that'll finish off our first subwave. This, again, we assume as a 3 wave, so we can alternately label this as a B. If in the case we do move up further, we could even, get rejected off that zone and say we're in some kind of running triangle, which would be even better. and then we get out. But again, we don't even assume a running variation, let alone a triangle. So if we do get some kind of move here as such, then I would assume that, okay, maybe a triangle is impossible if we do get this saved here and this level here. This is when I would actually start to assume that the possible triangle is in play, and this corrective move is now going to be completed as a triangle. So those are the only real ways that we can see the current scenario, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I'll summarize it one more time, where it's either you are seeing this as a completed move, where we have 3, 4, and then we're working in a flat idea. Now, there is another possibility, I think. There is, if we're seeing this as another alternative 3-wave, we can say that this is still working in some kind of leading diagonal variation. But again, we've already invalidated so many leading diagonal ideas. We could even say, again, if we're saying that this was some kind of ABC to the downside, we can alternatively say that this is working in a larger 1, 2, with the diagonal being created for wave 1. But too early to call. Really too early to call. And even this being possibly even a 3, 4 being completed, we can even say that this is a larger diagonal being made. We don't know. It could be an expanding variation too. We really don't know, because we've seen those kind of patterns play out as well, where we've seen, huge expanding diagonals in the ending variation where we went like this, and then we go like this, and then we pull back, where this created that 5th wave, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that'll complete off our whole expanding variation pattern. It could even end in a larger variation of this, we'll have to see, and that'll complete the 5th wave as well. It could be, again, that leading diagonal idea for a wave 1, 2, and then we come back for a pullback, but don't see that is really necessary to even talk about. I think right now what we have in terms of the data, the only thing that we can really talk about is this flat idea, if this is going to be deemed complete. Or, again, the scenario number 2, where we're working a larger double or kind of combo for a WXY, where we have this as an ABC, X, and then Y, overall keeping the Fibonacci ratios intact, and then we're out of here, and that's how we get out of there. Alternatively, we can even say that flat idea is going to be playing, where we have this having the X wave shorter in time, having this as a flat if we do go down on the micro time frame. So you can see there's so many variations on how we can be building this. But hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully, if you're not, understanding it, you can go back to my social media and read on how I've also done it in text form. Rewatch this video if you need to. Hopefully that was helpful, ladies and gentlemen. Again, if you're not in my X-Force Global Discord membership, I do all my daily updates there. If you're wanting to join, please do not hesitate to contact me. The link is in the description below. You can follow me on social media at X, formerly known as Twitter, at X-Force Global. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much. Goodbye.